She pilfered the radiance of others, but the events that transpired next were beyond belief. One would scarcely have credited that the seemingly youthful, beautiful girl on display was, in actuality, a centenarian and 8 years old. She appropriated the attractiveness and vitality of individuals, absorbing their accumulated years into herself, drawing their youthful essence into the very marrow of her bones and the sheen of her skin. Yet, what subsequently occurred would prove astonishing, a testament to forces both seen and unseen. This narrative imparts a valuable lesson, etched in the silence of fear and the eventual triumph of resilience. Within the tranquil settlement of Oakhaven Village, nestled beside a winding river and beneath the watchful gaze of ancient trees, where the evening zephyrs carried whispered secrets and unspoken fears, resided a woman known as Mosi. Her precise age remained an enigma, cloaked in the mists of time and willful ignorance, though common murmurs suggested she had long surpassed her 100th year. Despite this, she appeared no older than 25, perhaps even younger, her complexion possessing a smoothness akin to fine silk stretched taut over young bone, her lips full and rosy as freshly bloomed petals, her figure retaining the gentle curve of a flowing waterway untouched by the erosion of decades. There were no telltale lines etched around her eyes, no deepening furrows on her brow, no slackness in her jawline. Her laughter was free from the coarseness and gravelly quality of age. Her hands were firm, gentle, elegant, perhaps excessively so, remarkably delicate, seemingly untouched by the passage of years and the harshness of labor. Yet no one inquired, not because they lacked curiosity. Indeed, they did. They harbored wonder each time she moved past, her hips swaying subtly within the confines of her wrapper, her coiled hair glistening under the sun as if interwoven with threads of gold spun by celestial hands. They wondered when she participated with vibrant energy in matrimonial celebrations, her stamina matching and sometimes exceeding that of the youngest females present. They wondered when she donned fitted wrappers with a boldness and audacity unfitting for a woman of advanced age, and how her visage remained perpetually unlined, season after season, year after year, defying the relentless march of time. But they refrained from questioning, for those whose curiosity grew too pronounced, whose whispers became too loud, either departed bearing the appearance of individuals older than their own mothers, their bodies stooped and fragile, or mysteriously did not depart from the settlement at all, vanishing without a trace. Consequently, residents offered respectful smiles, a slight inclination of the head, and addressed her with the honorific Mama Mosi, cloaking their fear in deference. She operated a modest establishment for arranging hair, a secluded chamber of timber at the rear of her enclosure, somewhat dilapidated, yet filled with a peculiar energy. It featured fractured glass in a warped mirror, discolored images depicting coiffures of a bygone era tacked haphazardly to the walls, and an aroma comprising the thick, sweet scent of melting hair pomade interwoven with an unidentifiable element, something metallic, ancient, and strangely vital. Each young woman who frequented the premises emerged with enhanced beauty, their hairlines impeccably styled, their woven strands firm and orderly, their vibrancy unmistakable, seemingly radiating a newfound luminescence. However, days later, a disturbing transformation would commence. They would experience profound fatigue that no amount of rest could alleviate. Their skeletal structure would ache and pain as if burdened by unseen weight. Their dermis would show rapid signs of deterioration, losing its elasticity and glow. Some noticed silver threads appearing with alarming speed in their hair. Others simply vanished from the settlement entirely, never to reappear, their fates a subject of fearful speculation. If one was fortunate enough to fall under her influence only partially, they might wander the settlement appearing 6 decades beyond their actual years. Marked by deeply creased skin, a stooped posture, and painful joints that creaked with every movement. The unlucky ones subjected to her full methods were left deceased, their vitality and youthful essence cruelly extracted without clemency, their empty husks a silent warning. People murmured, but solely when the atmospheric current was sufficiently strong to bear their voices beyond the confines of Mosi's dwelling, hoping the wind would carry their fears away before they could take root. What the villagers did not know, what they dared not credit even in their darkest thoughts, was that Mosi did not rely on cosmetic secrets or special creams purchased from distant lands. She was quite literally depleting their youthful vitality, weaving it into her own being. Her unnatural strength, her ageless grace, derived directly from this clandestine practice. Mosi had long discerned, through ancient whispers and instinct, that a woman's power, her very being, her flourishing spirit, resided most potently within her hair, particularly when it was vital, luxuriant, coiled, brimming with the unspent energy of youth and bursting with aspirations for the future. And with her digits, soft, gentle, and deceptively delicate, she would appropriate it. Each woven strand she created was more than a style. It was an unspoken rite, a ritual of absorption. Each linear plait was a gradual extraction of life force. Each coiled section a snare, binding the essence to her will. Over the years, she had reaped the essence of life, the very bloom of youth, from countless women who had sat before her mirror. Her most potent taking, the one that haunted her perhaps least of all in her waking hours but most in the shadows, her own child, Adama. Adama had blossomed into someone more luminous than even Mosi had been in her prime, radiating a warmth that drew all who met her. She possessed a gentle smile that could calm a storm, laughter like wind chimes dancing in a breeze. Her hair was so ample, so thick and lustrous, it seemed the very heavens could find repose within its volume. But Mosi was afraid, gripped by a primal terror of losing her hold on youth. She perceived her own radiance diminishing, like a flame flickering low. Her charm had commenced to fade. The subtle lines near her gaze were becoming more apparent. The encroaching specter of senescence was closing in. And so, during a night of relentless rainfall while Adama was in slumber, Mosi crept into her chamber and plaited her hair, binding the life force into braids meant for stealing. By dawn, Adama bore the appearance of someone 4 decades older, her youth stripped away as easily as a snake sheds its skin. Her skin slackened and wrinkled, her body became frail, her dentition became unstable in her gums. She perished by the fading light of that same day, her last breath a whisper of confusion and pain. Mosi shed tears at her burial site, but not from sorrow for her lost daughter, but from profound remorse and dread, remorse for the act itself, and dread that she knew she would never cease. The hunger was too deep, the fear of age too great. Her grandchild, Kwasi, Adama's daughter, was the intended next, marked by Mosi's avarice for her own burgeoning vitality. That individual, however, escaped, a jagged exception to Mosi's cruel rule. She had discerned the truth with alarming speed, faster than any before her. She experienced skeletal discomfort following a seemingly simple coiffure, a chilling premonition. Washed her hands shortly thereafter, and beheld wrinkles reflected back in the basin's water, etched deep into skin that should have been smooth. Cried out into the thoroughfares, her voice fracturing like brittle glass, a sound that chilled the bones of those who heard it. "She is a pilfer. She purloined my prime. Witness what you inflicted upon me, you blind fools." Her visage aged beyond credible recognition in mere hours, instilling terror in the inhabitants, but also a desperate desire to silence her. But even then, shackled by fear and a desperate need to maintain the fragile peace, no one dared to directly accuse Mama Mosi. Kwasi was sent away in silence, bundled out of the village, as if she were a source of contagion, her cries echoing long after she was gone. Then, into this fearful quiet, arrived Zuri, 17 solar cycles old, bursting with life and unaware of the village's dark secret. A luminosity to her dermis as if kissed directly by solar radiation, a glow that seemed to come from within. Hair so dense and ample, so richly coiled, it seemed a breeze could elevate it like a regal headdress woven from shadow and light. Her smile could illuminate a dark chamber, chasing away shadows and doubts. Her laughter could mend afflictions, a joyful sound that resonated with genuine warmth. Zuri was unlike the other young females in Oakhaven. Most of the settlement's young women spent their days conversing idly beneath the shade of the baobabs, visiting herbal practitioners for minor ailments, and participating dutifully in traditional rites. But Zuri was different. She cherished books, devouring the written word with an insatiable hunger. She read ancient narratives about locales beyond the elevated terrain and waterways of Oakhaven Village, dreaming of worlds she had never seen. She believed in aspirations that stretched farther than the nearest central meeting place, aspirations that soared beyond the village boundaries. Zuri even managed a modest collection of texts at the periphery of the settlement, a dusty little room filled with tattered novels, worn-out sacred texts, and donated academic books, a beacon of knowledge in the quiet village. Juveniles would congregate there after completing their tasks, seated cross-legged on the floor while Zuri read aloud to them about distant metropolises with glass towers reaching for the sky and brilliant illuminations that banished the night. Most importantly, Zuri was a follower of the divine in a settlement where ancestral veneration and botanical rituals governed the inclinations of many, where fear often supplanted faith. Zuri clung tightly to her faith, a quiet strength within her. She read her sacred text beneath the celestial bodies that dotted the night sky. She whispered supplications before slumbering, entrusting her soul to a higher power. She wore a diminutive cross on a chain around her neck, a simple, powerful symbol, and Mosi observed her. From the initial moment, she beheld Zuri moving rhythmically at the harvest festival, laughing, her hair bouncing in the sunlight like a vibrant living thing. Mosi knew this young female was distinct, brimming with life, brimming with aspirations, brimming with the exact kind of potent, unspent energy Mosi could subsist upon for decades, perhaps even another century. But Zuri was cautious, guided by the wisdom of her mother. Her progenitor, Mama Aminata, a woman known for her quiet insight and deep spiritual connection, had cautioned her repeatedly. "Not everyone that smiles at you wishes you well, my child," she had stated, pressing a protective hand on Zuri's head, a silent blessing and warning. "There are ancient things in this world, young one, entities and practices older than memory, and not all of them are benevolent. Some things only the divine can salvage you from, only your faith can shield you. Be careful whose hands make contact with your hair, Zuri. Your strength and spirit are bound within it." And Zuri paid heed, initially, the warning echoing in her mind. One evening, bathed in the soft glow of twilight, Zuri and her confidant Nala sat beneath the old baobab outside the village knowledge house, the air thick with the scent of night-blooming flowers. Their conversation was soft in the fading light. "You know Mama Mosi can make your hair look like a queen," Nala stated, twirling a strand of her own newly woven hair, sleek and shining. "She is truly gifted. You could accompany me next week. Everyone is going, Zuri. It's the thing to do." Zuri furrowed her brow gently, closing her sacred text with care, its pages worn smooth from use. "I am uncertain, Nala. My progenitor says I should not permit just anyone to make contact with my cranium. Besides, I feel strange about all these hair matters, this focus on appearance above all else." Nala emitted a light, dismissive laughter, shaking her head. "Oh, Zuri, you are too rigid, too serious. It is merely her, Mama Mosi. And besides, she is amiable, Zuri. Everyone adores her. She's like a part of the village furniture." Zuri smiled faintly, a shadow of unease touching her expression, but articulated nothing more on the matter. Deep down, a little unease pricked her heart like a thorn, a tiny voice of caution she struggled to ignore. Mosi, a predator honed by time, was patient. She did not hasten the process, understanding that rushing could spook the most desirable prey. Instead, she initiated a slow, deliberate performance of benevolence, weaving herself into the fabric of Zuri's life. She would pass Zuri small gifts, ripe mangoes plucked from her trees, sweet yams from her cultivation, offering them with a warm smile and a casual blessing. She would greet her loudly in the central meeting place, praising her beauty, blessing her loudly for all to hear, cementing her image as a kind, harmless elder. She would arrive at the village knowledge house with young ones in tow, pretending to encourage learning, sitting quietly while Zuri read, observing her, assessing her vitality. She became the doting Auntie Mosi everyone trusted, her true nature hidden beneath layers of manufactured kindness. And slowly, subtly, Zuri's defenses fell, eroded by the constant display of apparent goodwill and the subtle pressure from her peers. Perhaps Mama Mosi was not so malevolent after all, she began to think. Perhaps she was merely misinterpreted, the subject of idle gossip and old wives' tales. Perhaps the accounts were merely apprehension transmitted like archaic beliefs, stories passed down through generations and twisted by fear. Finally, one warm afternoon when Zuri's mother was absent, visiting her sibling in the adjacent settlement, a circumstance Mosi had subtly ascertained, Mosi made her move. Nala had just gotten her hair done at Mosi's hut, emerging radiant. Delicate linear plaits, smooth and flawless, adorned her head. "You absolutely must come, Zuri," she enthused, her eyes shining with satisfaction. "She is so tender with your hair, and so prompt. You are in and out before you know it. Accompany me immediately." She stated Mosi had a free slot that very evening, an unexpected opening just for Zuri. Zuri paused, caught between desire and dread. She cast a glance at her sacred text resting on the shelf in her room, the symbol of her faith and her mother's wisdom. Within her mind, she distinctly heard the murmurs of her mother's voice, issuing cautionary words about ancient things and careful hands. But Nala was already tugging her hand, laughing, drawing her towards the inevitable. And Zuri, youthful and inquisitive, imbued with that perilous desire for acceptance and belonging, complied, stepping onto a path from which there would be no return. The decorative ornaments at the entry to Mama Mosi's beauty hut tinkled gently as Zuri entered, a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the heavy air. The chamber was dim, lit only by a few oil lamps and the fading light filtering through the fractured glass. The air was heavy with the cloying, dense aroma of melting hair pomade and something else, something metallic and ancient, something that prickled the back of Zuri's throat. The fractured looking glass on the wall captured her image, distorting it slightly, but showing her clearly, expansive eyes, wide and apprehensive, expression nervous, coiled hair cascading down her back like a dark river, thick and vibrant. Mosi turned from behind the corner, her movements unnervingly fluid, and smiled, a slow, almost too smooth smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh," she stated, her voice like smooth fabric, devoid of any roughness. "You finally came, Zuri. I hoped you would." Zuri inclined her head timidly, feeling a growing unease settle in her stomach. "Merely something straightforward, if you please, Mama Mosi. Orderly plates are all I need." "Of course, my young one," Mosi cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Approach and be seated. Let me make you beautiful." A solitary taper wavered beside the mirror, its luminescence shifting in an undetectable air current, casting dancing shadows. Mosi's digits trembled with anticipation, a barely perceptible tremor that spoke of deep hunger. She could already sense it, even before touching her. The pulse of vitality beneath Zuri's scalp, the sheer abundance of life force. The potency, the aspirations, the optimism, the unblemished future stretching before Zuri. It hummed through the atmosphere like electrical energy, a siren song to Mosi's ancient hunger. This was the moment she had waited for, the culmination of her patient hunt. This was the reaping that would provide sustenance for another century, perhaps more. Mosi smiled wider, a predatory glint in her eye, picking up her comb. "Relax, Zuri," she murmured reassuringly, her voice a silken lie. "You are safe here. You are in good hands." Zuri sat on the wooden stool, her body stiff with apprehension, and as Mosi's hand, soft and cool, made contact with her hair, a strange, deep chill traversed her spine, a feeling that went beyond mere nervousness. The solar orb had commenced its descent below the horizon when Zuri departed Mama Mosi's beauty hut, the sky painted in hues of orange and purple. Initially, she felt fine, perhaps even elated. Her scalp experienced a faint prickling sensation, a slight discomfort she attributed to the tightness of the new style. The woven strands felt taut and secure against her cranium. Mama Mosi had affixed colorful ornamentation to the termini of her plaits, and they produced a gentle resonance with each stride taken, a musical accompaniment to her steps. She smiled faintly to herself, perceiving herself as beautiful, perceiving herself as mature, confident. But as she traversed the settlement square, the heart of Oakhaven village, a disturbing transformation commenced, subtle at first, then rapidly accelerating. It commenced with a muted discomfort, a dull ache, in her dorsal region. Subsequently, her knees exhibited a subtle tremor, so minor she dismissed it as fatigue from walking. Upon reaching the initial bifurcation in the earthen path towards her dwelling, a crushing sensation of weight settled upon her chest, making it difficult to draw a full breath. Her upper limbs, which had previously moved with effortless elegance as she walked, now pendulated rigidly beside her, heavy and unresponsive. At that point, her body seemed to stop cooperating entirely, as if rebelling against an unseen force. The world seemed to tilt momentarily, the colors blurring at the edges. She applied a hand to her brow. It was radiating intense heat, burning with an unnatural fever. Confused, she stumbled onwards, her heart palpitating wildly in her chest, a frantic drumbeat of fear. Back at Mama Mosi's enclosure, inside the dim, airless establishment, Mosi was seated, bent over a darkened earthen vessel placed on a small stool. Within the vessel reposed a solitary filament of Zuri's hair, meticulously coiled like a serpent. Circumscribing it, Mosi had introduced various unguents and botanical matter unknown to the villagers, components of ancient, forbidden rituals. She murmured beneath her respiration, her voice desiccated and fractured like aged foliage crumbling to dust, incantations passed down through generations of predation. Ye spirit of youth, ye spirit of bloom, imbibe and nourish. Absorb her luminosity, appropriate her years, fix them within my being, bind them to my form. The vessel emitted a sibilant sound, a low hiss, vapor ascending like ephemeral digits reaching into the air. Mosi's physical form trembled with intensity, with the sheer force of the transfer. And then, before her eyes, her dermis regained its smoothness, erasing the subtle lines that had begun to appear. Her gaze, formerly obscured by seniority, now shone with youthful radiance and malicious triumph. Her labial region became fuller, vibrant with stolen life. Her hands grew stable and firm once more. She emitted laughter, a piercing, malevolent sound that echoed in the small hut, a sound of pure, unadulterated victory. She had succeeded. Zuri's youthful essence, her very future, belonged to her now. Zuri reeled into her domicile, barely able to force the entry panel ajar before succumbing to collapse upon the ground surface of her small room. Her skeletal structure seemed excessively weighty for her epidermal layer, her bones aching with the burden of years not her own. Her hair, previously luxuriant and yielding to the touch, now possessed a desiccated, fragile quality upon tactile interaction, breaking easily in her weakened grasp. Her formerly radiant complexion appeared to diminish its luminosity instantaneously, fading like a dying ember, as though an unseen appendage were obliterating the beauty she had possessed just hours before. Lacrimal fluid accumulated rapidly in her ocular organs, blurring her vision. "Mother," she articulated with a hoarse, strained quality, but received no response. Her progenitor was still absent, still visiting her sibling, unaware of the tragedy unfolding. Consternation, cold and sharp, took hold. She crept towards the surface where her sacred text rested, her only comfort and source of strength, but her digits exhibited such severe trembling she was unable to grasp it, her strength gone. "I ought to have heeded the counsel," she wept, the words racked with regret. "O divine being, I should have paid attention to the warnings, to the feeling in my heart." In desperation, Fueled by a flicker of hope, she propelled herself upright, oscillating like a nascent flame struggling against a strong wind. Perhaps Nala could render assistance. Perhaps Nala would discern a course of action, would know what to do. She did not even complete the thought before dragging herself out the entry panel, gasping for breath, her body protesting. Nala's dwelling was located merely 2 enclosures distant, a short walk for a young girl, an immense journey for someone burdened by the weight of age. Zuri stumbled towards the location, narrowly avoiding collapse on 2 occasions, her legs giving way beneath her. Settlement inhabitants she encountered scarcely identified her, her transformations so rapid and complete. They perceived only a form stooped and fragile, an elderly female clad incongruously in the attire of a juvenile girl, a sight that filled them with renewed dread. She struck feebly upon Nala's entry panel, her strength almost gone. "Nala, I implore you, open the entry. Render assistance, please." The entry panel emitted a grating sound as it opened slowly. Nala materialized in the doorway, her face a mask of shock, but Zuri gasped, a dry, rattling sound. Nala was in no superior state. Indeed, she looked almost as bad as Zuri felt. Her hair had diminished to fine filaments, brittle and thin. Her facial prominences had receded, giving her face a gaunt, hollow look. Her dorsal region was curved beneath an unseen burden, her shoulders slumped forward. She appeared 15 solar cycles older in the span of mere hours since Zuri had last seen her, her vibrancy completely extinguished. "It's too late, Zuri." Nala spoke softly, her voice devoid of resonance and fractured like dry earth, a sound of despair. Zuri succumbed into her embrace, weeping uncontrollably, tears tracing paths down her rapidly aging cheeks. "What transpired to us?" she exclaimed, her voice hoarse and broken. "What actions did we take, Nala?" Nala's own lacrimal fluid coursed down her own corrugated visage, mirroring Zuri's grief and fear. "Mama Mosi," she murmured, the name a curse. She claimed it. She appropriated everything we were, everything we had. The 2 young females, nearly indistinguishable now in their sudden, tragic age, clung to one another, swaying gently like foliage assaulted by atmospheric turbulence, sisters in their shared loss. But profoundly, chillingly, Zuri recognized in that moment that no supplications could reverse the effect. No medical practitioner, no herbalist, no ritual could rectify the situation. No amount of weeping could affect its return. Her existence, her aspirations, her attractiveness, her prospective fate, all eradicated, stolen piece by piece, filament by filament. Precisely as her progenitor had cautioned her. Had she only complied, had she only remained distant from Mama Mosi's hut, had she only paid heed to the warnings of her mother and her own heart. Back in her enclosure, oblivious or indifferent to the suffering she had caused, Mama Mosi was seated before the looking-glass, contemplating her mirrored image with unadulterated satisfaction. Her youthful vitality was fully reinstated, flowing through her veins like a potent elixir. Her facial prominences radiated a vibrant glow, her waist exhibited its youthful curve once more, her body felt light and strong. Zuri's demise was murmured about within the settlement for a brief duration, a ripple of fear and sorrow. A calamitous event, they declared, shaking their heads, an enigma, they articulated softly, unwilling to name the true cause. But no one dared articulate more, not in the light of day. No one spoke of Mama Mosi directly. No one mentioned the establishment nestled behind her dwelling. Apprehension had fastened their oral cavities more securely than sorrow ever could achieve, silence their only defense. Existence within Oakhaven village proceeded as was its custom, the rhythm of life and fear continuing. Fresh yields were harvested, new marital unions were celebrated, nascent infants were welcomed, newly aged individuals appeared inexplicably. The long-standing mysteries remained concealed beneath the particulate matter on the paths and the fruit-bearing arbors that offered their bounty regardless. And Mama Mosi, she flourished, a parasitic flower feeding on stolen light. Her dermis radiated even more brilliantly now, a beacon of false youth. She still resided within the same time-worn enclosure at the periphery of the settlement. She continued to operate her modest establishment, the little timber hut waiting silently. And periodically, when a young female journeyed into Oakhaven village brimming with aspirations and vitality, unaware of the village's secret, she would smile sweetly and beckon them from her doorway. "Approach, my young one." She would state with a voice like liquid sweetness, a sound that masked her cruel intent, "Permit me to enhance your attractiveness." And somewhere deep within the currents traversing the settlement, if one attended closely, if the wind was just right and the heart was open to sorrow, one could still perceive Zuri's voice, indistinct and fractured like shattered glass, murmuring a caution that arrived too tardily for her. "Permit her not to make contact with your coiffure." Yet only a select few ever paid heed, marked by their own brushes with the ancient darkness or guided by intuition. And Mama Mosi, she persists in existence, still attractive, still seemingly ageless, still awaiting her subsequent prey, a living embodiment of the village's silence and fear. She was known as Mama Mosi, the female who defied senescence, the woman who stole time itself. Within the tranquil settlement of Oakhaven village, residents still conversed about her in hushed, severe tones, solely when the atmospheric currents were sufficiently vigorous to transport their utterances afar, away from listening ears. To articulate negatively about Mama Mosi, to voice suspicion or accusation, was to engage in a perilous dalliance with mortality, an act that could cost you your life or, worse, your youth. All were aware she had subsisted for more than 100 years, yet not in the manner typical of elderly females, burdened by the weight of decades. Her physical form did not stoop with age. Her gaze did not lose its clarity, remaining sharp and alert. Her dermis did not crease or sag, it remained impossibly smooth. Her laughter retained the youthfulness of a juvenile female, a sound that was both charming and deeply unsettling. Her pelvic region still undulated within wrappers more restrictive than a widow's sorrow, moving with the grace of a young woman. Young females, drawn by the promise of enhanced beauty and the desire to fit in, converged upon her establishment for the Mosi touch, ignorant that their vitality constituted her concealed constituent, the secret ingredient to her unnatural longevity. And Zuri, the sweet, luminous Zuri, the female possessing unwavering faith, boundless aspirations, and hair like a regal headdress, had been her most recent casualty, her light extinguished. Enticed subtly, plated deliberately, entirely depleted of her life force. 3 solar cycles subsequently, having entered Mosi's establishment bursting with life, Zuri's corporeal form was devoid of warmth. An empty vessel, Mama Mosi, she participated in celebratory movement at a matrimonial ceremony that same week, replete with exultation and potency, her stolen youth fueling her dance. However, her concealed truth was not attributable to advantageous genetics or sacred botanicals gathered under the full moon. It was time unlawfully taken, her assumed youthful vigor purchased at a terrible cost. She had performed this upon numerous young females, upon her own offspring Adama, upon her own descendant Kwasi, who had been marked for the same fate. But only a single one persisted, only one endured the transformation and the exile. Only one survived to recount the narrative, a living testament to Mosi's cruelty. Namely, that was Kwasi, the young female who fled shrieking through Oakhaven village with hair that had become prematurely gray, her youthful color stolen. Visage desiccated like an aged tuber left too long in the sun. Her attractiveness pillaged, her epidermis weathered and brittle, her vitality vanished. Her lamentations were audible, a sound of raw grief and terror, yet trepidation was more so, the villagers' fear overriding their pity. The inhabitants expelled her, driving her from the village as if she were a pariah, a walking reminder of the darkness they preferred to ignore. They did not interrogate Mama Mosi. They merely observed in fearful silence as the fractured young female was forcibly removed from the settlement like a deranged canine, her cries fading in the distance. And so, Kwasi vanished from Oakhaven, swallowed by the world outside its fearful boundaries. She had located sanctuary within Lima Ridge, a settlement situated amidst elevated terrain and venerable mahogany trees, a place of quiet solitude. Her habitation was diminutive, consisting solely of a single chamber, a woven mat upon the floor, and a pervious covering that emitted soothing melodies during precipitation, the sound of rain a melancholic comfort. She communicated minimally with others, preferring the company of silence. She never divested herself of her head covering, concealing her gray hair and aged face from the world and herself. Juveniles were instructed by their parents to avoid lingering near her dwelling, to shun her. They asserted that she embodied a maleficent influence, a curse made flesh. And in many ways, she was afflicted, not solely by Mosi's malevolent sorcery that had stolen her youth, but by solitude, by perfidy, by an existence terminated prematurely in its prime and yet extended excessively in suffering. Her days transpired in quietude, a monotonous cycle of pain and reflection. Her skeletal structure pained with each exertion, each movement a reminder of the years piled upon her young frame. Her dorsal region became more curved with each seasonal cycle, bowing under an invisible weight. And whenever she perceived her reflected image within the looking-glass, a shard of broken pottery or a still pool of water, she averted her gaze immediately, unable to bear the sight of the stranger in the reflection. She was merely 16 solar cycles old in reality, a girl trapped in the body of an elder, yet bore the semblance of one nearing 80, the theft absolute and cruel. Sometimes she would dream of Adama, her progenitor, the mother she remembered before Mosi depleted her life force. She would perceive her in mirth, smiling and radiant, plaiting her hair whilst vocalizing an ancient Igbo soothing song, a melody of love and comfort. Subsequently, she would awaken, the memory sharp and painful, and weep, the tears silent and bitter. There were no soothing songs presently, only the sound of the wind and the rain. No melodies, no kin nearby, merely atmospheric movement and quietude until the anecdotal accounts emerged from Oakhaven, carried by travelers or whispered by those brave enough to venture there. 2 young females from Oakhaven village had vanished following a visit to Mama Mosi's establishment, their absence noted with fear. A juvenile asserted she witnessed her sibling lose consciousness in Mosi's chair and never regain sentience, her small voice filled with terror. An adult female who had her hair styled reported that her reflected image exhibited senescence during the night, aging years in a single sleep. And suddenly, chillingly, Kwasi realized her grandmother was still engaging in the practice, still extracting the essence of vitality from young females, still flourishing, still unmolested by consequence, and preeminently, still malevolent, her hunger seemingly insatiable. She sat upon the floor of her habitation at night, bathed in the dim light of her lamp, gazing at a distorted looking-glass, the warped surface reflecting her tragic reality. Her visage was corrugated and sunken, a mask of premature age. Her gaze lacked luster, her corporeal form attenuating with each passing day. "I ought to have halted her," she articulated softly to herself, her voice a raspy whisper. "I ought to have persevered, cried out more vehemently, performed some action, anything to stop her." She acquired a diminutive implement of timber used for arranging hair, simple and worn, the final bestowal from her progenitor, a piece of her mother's life. Her digits exhibited tremor as she grasped it, the wood cool and smooth. And for a moment, holding the familiar object, an inner luminescence ignited within her, a spark of courage she thought had died. Then the chamber became cold, a sudden, unnatural chill. An abrupt air current moved through the habitation, even penetrating the sealed entry panel, swirling dust and leaves. And then, a radiance. It was dim initially, akin to lunar illumination traversing the ground surface, soft and ethereal. But it expanded in magnitude, became more thermal, filling the small room with warmth and light. Kwasi became immobile, incapable of locomotion, held rapt by the apparition. The luminescence congregated in the central area of the chamber, swirling like nebulosity, like mist forming into substance, until it coalesced into the configuration of a young female, slender, comely, her hair resembling a cascade of dark silk. It was Zuri. The individual they claimed had vanished, disappeared without a trace. The one who had most recently succumbed to Mama Mosi's enchantment, her light stolen. Zuri. Kwasi's voice fractured, a sound of disbelief and sorrow. Zuri did not respond with spoken words, not verbally. Her labial region remained inert, yet her essence permeated the chamber like a melody perceptible only to the spirit, a silent song of presence. She advanced, almost levitating above the floor, and knelt before Kwasi, her vibrant form contrasting sharply with Kwasi's aged fragility. Her digits, warm and luminous, made contact with Kwasi's senescent hands, and instantaneously Kwasi drew a sharp breath, a gasp of astonishment and relief. Warmth inundated her extremities, chasing away the perpetual cold. The discomfort in her dorsal region diminished, the aches fading. Her digits became linear and smooth for the first time in numerous years. Her cardiac organ pulsed with a newfound vigor, strong and steady. Lacrimal fluid streamed down her visage, tears of shock and hope. Zuri inclined closely and murmured, not audibly with her lips, but within Kwasi's spirit, a voice heard deep within her soul. Should you annihilate her, should you break the cycle, your youthful vitality will be reinstated. You have the power. Then the luminescence diminished slowly, like a fading light. The thermal sensation disappeared, the warmth receding. The lack of warmth, the familiar chill of her aged body, recurred. Zuri was absent, vanished as quickly as she had appeared. But Kwasi's gaze no longer appeared vacant, resigned to her fate. They blazed with a fierce, determined light. She did not engage in slumber during that night. The vision of Zuri, the feel of warmth returning to her hands, the message in her spirit, it was an elixir and a call to action. She prepared the minimal possessions she possessed, her progenitor's scarlet head covering, a cherished item saturated with memories, a diminutive sacred text with worn pages, its words a source of quiet strength, the timber implement for arranging hair, now more than just a tool, and a container of aqueous liquid, her meager supply for the journey. She exited the dwelling before dawn, a solitary figure silhouetted against the pre-dawn sky, and regarded the celestial bodies slowly fading. Her corporeal form still possessed elevated temperature, a lingering warmth from Zuri's touch, yet her spirit felt more potent, more resolute than previously. She would return to Oakhaven, even at the cost of her life. She would not permit another young female to succumb to Mosi's predatory hunger. She murmured a supplication to the divine entity she felt watching over her, then to the atmospheric currents, asking for guidance and strength, then to the young females who had perished, vowing retribution and remembrance. Vowed to them retribution, not born of hate, but of a fierce need for justice, and prior to the onset of daylight, she commenced her expedition. The thoroughfare leading to Oakhaven village was extended and circuitous, winding through the landscape like a hesitant serpent. She proceeded without foot coverings, the earth cool beneath her soles. Her lower limbs pained with each step, the muscles unused to such exertion, the joints aching with premature age. Her abdominal region emitted sounds of hunger, a hollow ache. Her dorsal region vocalized anguish with each stride, a constant reminder of the burden she carried. Yet she did not cease, propelled by a force greater than her physical limitations. The wooded area surrounding the path was verdant in certain locations, dense and dark. The arbors projected low, their ramifications extending like predatory appendages, reaching out as if to impede her progress. Peculiar auditory phenomena reverberated through the trees, unsettling sounds she couldn't identify. Noises, murmurs, perhaps spectral entities drawn to her quest. At intervals, the atmospheric current emitted sounds of such volume, whispering and howling, that she was compelled to cover her auditory organs, fearing they carried Mosi's influence. She observed an avian creature regarding her from a ramification, its eyes sharp and knowing. A dark feline creature moving swiftly across the thoroughfare, a silent omen. A deceased reptilian creature lay obstructing her route, a macabre marker. She understood these were portents, signs that she was observed, that her journey was known. Mama Mosi had perceived her progress, sensed her approach, yet she persevered. Looked along the thoroughfare ahead, the circuitous track that would guide her back to Oakhaven Village, back to the settlement that had expelled her, back to the female who had devastated her existence, stolen her youth, and haunted her dreams. She inhaled deeply, the scent of damp earth and ancient trees filling her lungs, and bound her progenitor's scarlet head covering securely about her cranium, a visible symbol of her lineage and purpose. This was no longer merely an expedition, a painful walk home. It was conflict, a spiritual battle, and she would engage, armed with faith and grief. At midday, the solar radiation was intense, beating down upon her head and shoulders. Her petal extremities became vesicular, painful blisters forming on her soles. Her aqueous supply was nearly depleted, her throat dry and cracked. Her head covering was saturated with perspiration, heavy and damp. She rested against an arbor, seeking a sliver of shade, and nearly lost consciousness, her body nearing its limit. "I am incapable of accomplishing this," she murmured, the words weak and despairing. "I am exceedingly frail. My body is old." Her corporeal form implored her to capitulate, to lie down and succumb to exhaustion, but then a gentle air current, a transient radiance, a feeling of warmth, and Zuri's voice once more within her spirit, soft but firm. "Proceed, Kwasi. You are nearly at your destination. Do not falter now." Her potency returned akin to an abrupt undulation, a wave of strength washing over her. Kwasi stood upright, exhibiting more stability than previously, her legs suddenly feeling stronger. The wooded area behind her became quiet, the unsettling sounds ceasing. The thoroughfare ahead seemed to murmur her appellation, calling her forward, and somewhere deep within the settlement of Oakhaven Village, Mama Mosi abruptly recoiled from her looking-glass, her reflection wavering. A sensation of cold, sharp and unexpected, traversed her skeletal structure, chilling her to the bone despite the heat. She furrowed her brow, perceiving something ancient, something overlooked in her arrogance, something in the process of returning, coming for her. And far away, beneath the dense vegetal covering and the ascending solar orb, Kwasi continued her perambulation, proceeding slowly, stably, and intensely determined. Her gaze was fixed ahead, her cardiac organ was robust, pulsing with renewed purpose. Her expedition had just commenced its final, crucial stage, and she would not retreat. Not on this occasion. Not ever again. The wooded expanse broadened significantly before her, the trees thinning out, akin to a hidden truth awaiting revelation. Kwasi walked carefully, her progenitor's scarlet head covering tied tightly around her gray hair, a constant reminder of her mother and the cost of Mosi's power. The timber implement for arranging hair resided within her garment receptacle, close to her heart, like an amulet of defiance. Her petal extremities were vesicular, throbbing with pain, her labial region was desiccated, her lips cracked, yet her cardiac organ had never pulsed with greater intensity, fueled by purpose and spiritual guidance. She was returning to her origin point, the place of her undoing, not in pursuit of solace, not for tranquility, but for equitable resolution, for a settling of accounts. The solar orb descended beneath the arbors, projecting elongated umbra, stretching shadows across the land, as her expedition protracted towards dusk. And that was the point at which the initial trial manifested, designed to test her resolve and break her spirit. She beheld her once more, Zuri, standing beneath the arbor that had formerly provided shade for their settlement's collection of texts, the very place where Zuri had read to the children. But that could not be, not in the physical world. Kwasi became rigid, rooted to the spot, her respiration seizing in her chest. "Zuri," she articulated softly, lacrimal fluid already obscuring her visual capacity, tears of recognition and sorrow. Zuri smiled with gentleness. Her verdant attire seemed to drift like nebulosity, insubstantial yet real. Kwasi, she stated, her voice a soft echo, her upper limbs extended in invitation. You have progressed a great distance, endured much, yet you must now retreat. Kwasi's chest experienced contraction, a painful tightening. But you instructed me to arrive, she whispered, confused. Zuri advanced more closely, her form shimmering, her voice possessed a softness akin to descending plumage, gentle but insistent. I was mistaken, Kwasi. The time has passed. She possesses greater potency now, her power grown. You will perish if you persist in proceeding. Go back. Kwasi's spirit was agitated, torn between the vision and her purpose. Her knees became enfeebled, threatening to buckle. The wooded area felt cold anew, the warmth receding. But you will be consumed. Zuri's form wavered slightly. Your corporeal form is fatigued. You are exceedingly brittle. Retreat, Kwasi. Live. Then she extended her reach towards Kwasi's hand, offering solace or a path back. But something was amiss. Her digits were excessively elongated, stretching unnaturally. Her nail formations too dark, too sharp. And when she smiled once more, her dentition was irregular, sharp and predatory. Kwasi's eyes widened in dawning horror. That entity was not Zuri. No, not the true Zuri. She retreated instinctively, her cardiac organ accelerating, a frantic drumbeat of fear in her chest. You are not that individual, she cried out, her voice gaining strength. The form wavered violently, its visage distorting into something monstrous, and then the concealment disintegrated, peeling away like old skin. There stood Mama Mosi, grinning a terrible, triumphant grin, her eyes dark and filled with vapor, with ancient malice. You are merely a young female, she vocalized with a sibilant sound, a hiss of contempt. A tattered, fractured juvenile burdened by years not your own. You cannot emerge victorious from this confrontation. You are nothing. But Kwasi retreated further, pressed her implement for arranging hair to her chest, the simple piece of wood a shield against the darkness, and murmured, her voice trembling but resolute, the divine being dispatched me. I carry a greater power than you know. You cannot impede my purpose. Your time is ending. And the atmospheric current emitted a sound akin to acclamation, a gust of wind sweeping through the trees, as Mama Mosi's deception fragmented into particulate matter, dissolving into dust. Kwasi did not cast a glance backwards. She walked with increased celerity now, fear replaced by fierce resolve. She recollected. She recalled her purpose for arriving, the faces of the lost girls, the pain of her mother. The thoroughfare meandered into a depression where the arbors seemed veiled in vapor, mist rising from the damp earth, and the environment became silent, almost hallowed, the air thick with sorrow and memory. There she beheld the outline of a female figure seated beneath a tree known for its soft fibers, a majestic cottonwood, vocalizing an ancient soothing song, a lullaby of her childhood. Her cardiac organ ceased, stopping in her chest for a beat. It was Adama, her progenitor. She had not beheld her in many years, not in the physical world, not since that rainy night. The female turned, her face illuminated by an inner light, smiling in the manner characteristic solely of mothers, soft and replete with comprehension and unconditional love. My offspring, she stated, her voice akin to a flowing waterway, cool and comforting. You look tired, my Kwasi. You have walked a long road. Kwasi collapsed onto her knees, tears streaming down her face. Mother, she choked out, reaching out a trembling hand. The spectral entity extended forth and made contact with her cheek, her touch warm and gentle. You have borne an excessive burden of suffering, Kwasi. You have carried the weight of years and sorrow. You must undergo restoration within your spirit before you are able to liberate others. Lacrimal fluid descended like precipitation from her ocular organs, years of pent-up grief washing away. How do I recover from that which she inflicted upon us? She whispered, the question born of deep pain. By recalling the identity you possessed prior to the suffering, Adama replied, her smile gentle. By remembering who you were before she took it all. Then Adama commenced vocalizing once more. It was the melody she customarily vocalized whilst weaving Kwasi's hair when she was a child, a song of protection and love. Kwasi, exhibiting tremor, joined in, her voice hesitant at first, then growing stronger. Their vocalizations harmonized like the atmospheric current moving through the trees, a lament and a rebirth. And as they vocalized, an inner transformation occurred within Kwasi. The burden she had borne commenced to elevate, lifting from her shoulders. Her dorsal region became straight, her posture regaining its youthful alignment. Her digits ceased their tremor. Her spirit became more luminous, a light rekindled. When the melody concluded, Adama smiled a final time, her form starting to fade. You are prepared, my child. You are ready. And akin to nebulosity, she dispersed into the illumination of the morning, leaving Kwasi kneeling in the hallowed ground, forever changed. As she approached the boundaries of Oakhaven village, the atmosphere became dense, replete with recollection and enchantment, with the weight of history and the power of the present moment. Then she beheld her again, not in corporeal form, but in spectral essence, a final, desperate projection. Mama Mosi was positioned before her on the path, her gaze keen, her form enveloped in youthful vigor that gleamed like purloined precious metal, a hollow, temporary shell. However, this was not a physical struggle, no contest of strength. It was an exchange between spirits, a confrontation on a plane beyond flesh and blood. You have returned, Mosi stated with acrimony, her voice sharp with rage and fear. To terminate my existence, child? Kwasi advanced, her step steady, her spirit resolute. I arrived to impede your actions, Mama Mosi. To stop you from harming others. Mosi's labial region trembled with emotion, but her voice persisted in its cruelty, a defense against vulnerability. They forsook me. They ridiculed my senescence. I was inconsequential, a withered leaf. I required attractiveness to be seen, to be valued. It was the singular method by which they would regard me, by which I could exist. Kwasi's hand clenched around the hair implement. She desired to vocalize shrieks, to inflict harm, to propel lithic projectiles at her, to unleash the anger that had simmered for years, but instead, she perceived her authentically for her reality, her true, damaged self. Not the monstrous entity, but the female, the despairing, fractured female who had subsisted upon others merely to experience a sense of merit, of being worthy of notice. You are lamentable, Mama Mosi, Kwasi stated gently, the words cutting deeper than any stone. Mosi's ocular organs expanded in surprise and shock. Kwasi advanced nearer, her voice trembling slightly with the effort of compassion, but clear. You injured me. You injured my progenitor. You ended the lives of young females who had committed no offense against you, who trusted you. But I offer you absolution. Mosi gasped as though she had been impaled, a sound of pure agony. Her radiance wavered, flickering like a candle in a storm. I did not articulate that for your benefit, Kwasi appended, her voice firm now. I articulated it for my own benefit. I will no longer bear the burden you represent, the anger, the pain. I release it. I release you. And with that, Mama Mosi's spirit emitted a protracted, agonizing lamentation, a wail of despair and defeat, and disappeared entirely, the spectral form dissolving into the morning air. By the point Kwasi entered Oakhaven village, the settlement was quiet. Excessively quiet, a stillness that spoke of anticipation. She followed the indistinct auditory emanation of grating cordage, a rhythmic creak, to the rear of Mama Mosi's beauty hut. There she was, Mama Mosi, her physical form left behind by her fleeing spirit. Her gaze vacant, her digits trembling uncontrollably, positioned upon a stool made of timber with a loop of rope suspended above her from a sturdy beam. She had made preparations to terminate her existence, unable to face the consequences, or perhaps haunted by the spirits of her victims. Perhaps culpability had finally overtaken her after the spiritual confrontation. Perhaps the spectral entities had commenced afflicting her as well, seeking their own form of justice. Kwasi promptly advanced rapidly, her steps decisive. "No!" she exclaimed, her voice possessing greater potency, more authority, than she had ever experienced before. "You are not permitted to escape this easily. You will face what you have done." Mama Mosi pivoted abruptly, startled, her vacant gaze wide with shock and recognition as she saw Kwasi, somehow restored. "You," she whispered, the sound weak and frail. But Kwasi did not tarry. She extracted the timber implement for arranging hair from her garment receptacle, her progenitor's implement, the one that had formerly contained affection and care, now repurposed for a sacred task. Prior to Mosi being able to react, to pull the rope, to escape, Kwasi positioned herself behind her and commenced arranging her hair with the implement, a final, reversing ritual. Mama Mosi drew a sharp, rattling breath as the first touch landed. The atmosphere surrounding them vibrated with energy. The heavens became somber, the morning light dimming unnaturally. Her corporeal form trembled with intensity, with the force of time reversing its cruel flow. And then her youthful vitality commenced its rapid regression, flowing out of her, back into the earth, back into the ether. Her dermis became irregular, creasing and sagging. Her labial region desiccated, becoming thin and pale. Her hair became achromatic, turning gray and brittle in moments. Her skeletal structure contracted, her body shrinking and stooping. She emitted a final lamentation, one signifying suffering, remorse, and ultimate capitulation, a sound of a life force draining away. Then she transmuted into particulate matter, crumbling into dust. Precisely there, within Kwasi's hands, held by the timber implement. The atmospheric current dispersed her remnants across the courtyard, scattering the dust of her consumed years. Kwasi remained standing in silence, the implement for arranging hair still within her grasp, no longer just a tool, but a symbol of restoration. Looked at her own reflected image within the fractured looking-glass of the establishment and drew a sharp breath, not of pain, but of wonder. Her dermis was radiating, smooth and glowing, her hands were smooth and firm, her hair was lengthy and dark once more, cascading down her back with youthful vitality. She was complete, not merely in physical form, her youth restored, but in spirit, healed and whole. She had accomplished it. She had terminated the curse, not through aggression or violence, but through fortitude, the restoration of her own spirit, and the profound, wrenching act of compassion. The settlement's auditory signaling devices resonated once more for the initial time in numerous years, their sound a clarion call breaking the silence of fear, and residents emerged from their dwellings, drawn by the sound and the strange atmosphere. They observed Kwasi positioned within the courtyard where Mama Mosi had formerly held sway, now marked only by a scattering of dust. Initially, no one articulated a sound, frozen by disbelief and awe. Subsequently, a female knelt, her shoulders shaking. Subsequently another, and then another, until many were on their knees. They commenced weeping, silent tears at first, then sounds of release. Not solely for Mama Mosi, who was gone, but for all they had permitted, all the silence, all the fear, all the young females they had forfeited to her hunger, all the verities they had disregarded for the sake of comfort and denial. Kwasi articulated nothing with her voice. She was not required to. She had already articulated all that held significance through her actions, her journey, her transformation. And within her quietude, the settlement commenced restoration, a slow, painful healing process, precisely as she had done. The atmospheric current within Oakhaven village altered following that solar cycle. It no longer murmured trepidation, the weight of fear lifted. It bore tranquility, a sense of peace, as though it too felt relief from the long oppression. Mama Mosi's establishment was reduced to ash without ceremony, burned to the ground, its dark energy purged. The inhabitants assembled in a circular formation around the pyre. As the conflagration ascended, projecting umbrae across their visages marked by lacrimal fluid, by years of tears and sorrow. Not one syllable was articulated, a silence different from the old fear, yet their cardiac organs were replete. Not with animosity for Mosi, but with liberation, with the freedom to grieve and to heal. And in the midst of everything stood Kwasi, restored to youth, radiant once more, yet perpetually altered, her eyes holding the wisdom and pain of years she hadn't lived. The subsequent lunar cycle, Kwasi reopened the neglected collection of texts at the periphery of the settlement, the identical dusty room that Zuri had formerly maintained. She removed the particulate matter, burnished the horizontal surface of the reading table, and positioned 3 articles in the central area of the table. A sacred text, its worn pages a testament to enduring faith, her progenitor's scarlet head covering, a symbol of love and lineage reclaimed, and the timber implement for arranging hair, now a tool of healing and memory. Each article contained a narrative, a story of persistence against overwhelming odds, of forfeiture of youth and life, and of divine favor in the face of darkness. Juveniles commenced assembling once more, drawn not solely by the volumes and the promise of stories, but by her presence, by the aura of strength and peace she carried. They refer to her as Sister Kwasi, a title of affection and respect. She read aloud to them each evening, precisely as Zuri had customarily done, keeping her friend's legacy alive. However, she did not solely recount narratives from the books. She conveyed to them the verity concerning valor, concerning the perils of noncompliance with fear and evil, and concerning the potency of restoration, of healing the spirit and the community. Upon the vertical surface of the collection of texts, the library wall, Kwasi inscribed names, numerous of them, young females who had been forfeited to Mama Mosi's tactile contact, their lives tragically cut short. Each appellation rendered in a soft white friable substance, encircled by celestial bodies, stars against the dark wall, commemorating their lost light. Kwasi never entered into a marital union. She was not required to seek external validation or happiness. She discovered kinship within those who paid heed to her words, restoration in the narratives she imparted and embodied, and tranquility in every newly formed plate she wove, each strand a symbol of life renewed and protected. She instructed the young females in the art of weaving, not just hair, but stories, memories, and strength. Each filament a representation of persistence, of enduring beauty, of life that could not be stolen permanently. As solar cycles elapsed, the account of Mama Mosi evolved into lore, a cautionary tale woven into the fabric of Oakhaven Village. Progenitors recounted it not to instill fear in their offspring, but to serve as a reminder that attractiveness appropriated is never of greater value than tranquility preserved, than inner peace and safety. And that restoration, reclaiming what was lost through courage and compassion, is the most profound form of retribution, the truest victory over darkness. The story was a lesson, a warning, and a promise that even after the deepest shadows, the light can return, carried on the wind and woven into the hair of the next generation.